Hare Krishna, welcome. So today we have our night meeting, and today we will study chapter 15. This chapter is entitled The Pandavas Retire Timely. And of course, this is the chapter that describes the disappearance of Krishna, right? The reaction of the Pandavas on receiving the news of the disappearance of Krishna, and also like Kali Yuga starting. And also in this lesson, we will discuss a lot about the details about the disappearance of Krishna, because it's something very bewildering, right? First of all, Krishna is God, so how God can die? Second of all, Krishna is the hero of the Srimad Bhagavatam, so how the hero can die right in the beginning of the book, right? So it's a very bewildering situation. So first topic for today is that Arjuna returns to the palace completely devastated. So remember that on the last part, Yudhishthira, he started noticing the symptoms of Kali Yuga starting, right? And he started feeling that something happened. And then when Arjuna came to the palace, completely unhappy, completely devastated, Yudhishthira, he started offering many possibilities. Oh, maybe this happened. Maybe that happened. What happened to you, Arjuna? Maybe that other happened, right? Maybe you lost a battle to someone, right? Maybe you just respected some senior. But as Arjuna was not reacting to all these different possibilities that Yudhishthira Maharaja was offering, it became clear that the reason was that Krishna had left the planet, right? So this chapter starts from this point where Arjuna says to Yudhishthira that no, Krishna left the planet. That's the reason. So Arjuna is the constant companion of Krishna, right? So every time Krishna appears in some universe of this material world, Arjuna appears with him, right? They are always together. So in the Bhagavad Gita, when Arjuna asks Krishna, how could he have spoken the Bhagavad Gita to Vivasvan, like many millions of years ago, Krishna answered that Arjuna was also present when this happened, but he had forgotten, right? But of course, Krishna still remembered. So this shows how they are always together, right? Even millions of years ago, they were together when Krishna spoke the Gita to Vivasvan. And then there is this verse from Bhagavad Gita 4:5. The personality of God had said, many birds, both you and I, have passed. I can remember all of them, but you cannot, O subduer of the enemy. So Krishna can remember, Arjuna can't, but anyway, the point is that they are always together. So now, facing the separation of the Lord, Arjuna is completely devastated, right? So the inquiries from Maharaja Yudhishthira in the previous chapter, right, chapter 14, just increased his grief, right? So Arjuna was so devastated that it was not possible for him to reply properly because his voice was completely choked up, like due to emotion, so he couldn't speak. So Sutta Goswami said that Arjuna, the celebrated friend of Krishna, was grief-stricken because of his strong feeling of separation from Krishna, over and above all Maharaja Yudhishthira's speculative inquiries. Right? That's the first verse of this chapter. So, okay, now we go to the next slide. So Sutta Goswami, he describes that due to grief, Arjuna's mouth and his lotus-like heart had dried up, and he had lost all luster, right? All the luster of his body was gone. He was completely, he was looking very unhappy. So in his commentary, Srila Sridhara Swami, he adds that Arjuna was weeping away his tears using his palm. So he was literally crying, big man, Arjuna, he was crying. And he started to sob. He started, really crying. So with great difficulty, finally, after a long time, he was able to control himself and he was able to reply something to Yudhishthira. So Arjuna replied, O king, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, who treated me exactly like an intimate friend, has left me alone. Thus, my astounding power, with astonished even the demigods, is no longer with me. I have just lost him, whose separation for a moment would render all the universes unfavorable and void, like bodies without life. Like Krishna maintains all the universes. So even if Krishna would leave the material universes, even for 1 second, everything would be destroyed. Krishna maintains everything. It's not possible for anything to exist without Krishna. So so devotees, they find solace in the separation of Krishna by remembering his pastimes, right? So Arjuna, he does remember it, how Krishna empowered him to execute, many superhuman activities, right? And how Krishna protected the Pandavas in many dangerous situations. So Arjuna remembered several pastimes that are described in the Mahabharata. For example, how Krishna empowered him to pierce the fish on the ceiling through the wheel of the chariot to win Draupadi in marriage, right? That's a very interesting pastime. Draupadi wanted to marry Arjuna. So, but according to the Kshatriya laws, Kshatriya rules, there should be a test to select the husband. So they conceived a test that only Arjuna could pass. So this way, would be sure that Arjuna would be the husband. So this test was that they put a fish in the ceiling of the palace, very, very high. And not only Arjuna, so Arjuna had to hit the fish using an arrow, using his bow, but there were two two additional difficulties. One was that he couldn't look directly to the fish. He couldn't look up. There was a plate with water in the ground, so he had to look down to this water and try from there to find the fish on the ceiling and shoot the arrow there. But to make it even harder, there was a wheel of a chariot there protecting the fish spinning. So Arjuna had to calculate the speed of the wheel so the arrow would pass between the beams of this chariot of this wheel and hit the fish. So that was like really superhuman. And of course, Arjuna could do that. But that was because of the empowerment of Krishna, right? And also, he remembered how, due to the mercy of Krishna, he could defeat the demigods and thus allow Agnideva to devastate the Kandava forest. And also, he could save the demon Maya Danava, who took shelter of him. So Maya Danava was a great materialist. And the Lord decided to kill him using his Sudarshana chakra, right? So who can protect you when the Lord himself decides to kill you because you are a great rascal? When the Lord himself decides to punish you, like in the case of Maya Danava. You can be saved only if you take shelter of a devotee. And that's what the Maya Danava did. He took shelter of Arjuna, the Lord's pure devotee, and then the Lord decided to spare him, right? So instead of killing him, the Lord decided to engage him in building a majestic assemble house for Maharaja Yudhishthira. Mahadanava is a great architect. So since he took shelter of Arjuna, the Lord told him to serve the Pandavas, and he did that. So in this way, right, not only Mayadanava was saved, but he also had the opportunity of serving the Pandavas. So, very nice, right? Very fortunate. So, okay, so next slide. So now there are some quotes here. So from the chapter, from Srimad Bhagavatam. So, only by his merciful strength I was able to vanquish all the lusty princes assembled at the palace of King Drupada for the selection of the bridegroom. With my bow and arrow, I could pierce the fish target and thereby gain the hand of Draupadi. Because he was near me, it was possible for me to conquer with great dexterity the powerful king of heaven, Indradeva, along with his demigod associates, and thus enable the fire gods to devastate the Kandava forest. So there was some quarrel between Indra and Agni Deva there. Agni Deva wanted to burn the forest because he wanted to eat the forest. Indra and the other demigods, they didn't want. And Arjuna took the part of Agnidev and he defeated Indra and the other demigods. And that's, of course, by the empowerment of Krishna, right? How can a human being, fight with a demigod? But Arjuna did that, and he defeated the demigods because of the empowerment of Krishna. That's again superhuman. And then Arjuna continues. And only by his grace was the demon named Maya saved from the blazing Kandava forest, and thus we could build or assembly house of wonderful architectural workmanship, where all the princes assembled during the performance of the Rajasuya Yaga and paid you tributes, right? Arjuna is speaking to Yudhishthira here. So, another pastime is that when Duryodhana, he made an intrigue, right, sending Durvasa Muni with his 10,000 disciples to eat at the cottage of the Pandavas when they were in exile, right, at a time when they were incapable of serving so many guests. Imagine you are living in the forest and 10,000 people come to your house, wanting to take prasad, what you are going to do, right? So when this happened, Krishna saved them by accepting a small piece of vegetable from Draupadi. And then when Krishna ate it, the sages, they felt completely full and incapable of eating anything more. So thus they decided to just go away without further disturbing the Pandavas. So by accepting a small particle of food from Draupadi, Krishna made them completely full, like made their bellies completely full, and they had to go away without disturbing the Pandavas. So another pastime is that once Arjuna, he met Lord Shiva in the forest, dressed as a hunter. So Arjuna fought with him so valiantly that he became satisfied with him and presented him with his personal weapon, the Pashupastra. Right? And then when Arjuna visited the celestial planets, the demigods not only honored him, but took shelter in his arms, right? Asking him to kill the demon Navatakavacha, who was causing them problems. So you see, Arjuna, because of the empowerment of Krishna, he became so powerful that even the demigods, they were asking his help. So now see how wonderful it is, right? And then Arjuna says, during our exile, Durvasa Muni, who eats with his 10,000 disciples, intrigued with your enemies to put us in dangerous trouble. At that time, he, Lord Krishna, simply by accepting the remnants of food, saved us. By his accepting food thus, the assembly of Munis, while bathing the river, felt sumptuously fed, and all the three worlds were also satisfied. It was by his influence only that in a fight I was able to astonish the personality of God, Lord Shiva, and his wife, the daughter of Mount Himalaya. Thus he, Lord Shiva, became pleased with me and awarded me his own weapon. Other demigods also delivered their respective weapons to me, and in addition, I was able to reach the heavenly planets in this present body and was allowed a half elevated seat. So even the demigods, they were paying respects to Arjuna. So when I stayed for some days as a guest in the heavenly planets, all the heavenly demigods, including King Indradeva, took shelter of my arms, which were marked with the Gandiva bow, to kill the demon named Navatakavacha. O king, descendant of Ajamida, at the present moment, I am bereft of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, by whose influence I was so powerful, right? So that's the situation of Arjuna, right? Arjuna was so powerful because of the empowerment of Krishna, right? And now that Krishna left, this power also left him. So Arjuna also remembers other pastimes. He also remembers how, by the mercy of Krishna, he was able to cross the great ocean of the army of the Kauravas, right, during the battle of Kurukshetra, and defeat great generals like Bhishma, Drona, Karna. So, due to the protection of Krishna, all these great generals, they couldn't cause him any harm. Even at the most dangerous moment, when he had to come down from his chariot to give water to the horses, right? So Krishna protected Arjuna. So it's interesting that Arjuna was the only warrior that during the 18 days of the battle of Kurukshetra, he was not hurt. Everyone else, or died or at least were seriously hurt. Arjuna, he was not hurt, he was not hit even once during the whole battle of Kurukshetra. And that's due to the protection of Krishna. So Arjuna then remembers his personal association with Krishna and their friendly dealings. So he says to Yudhishthira, O king, his jokings and frank talks were pleasing and beautifully decorated with smiles. His addresses unto me, as son, O son of Pritha, O friend, O son of the Kuru dynasty, and all such heartiness are now remembered by me, and thus I am overwhelmed. So generally, both of us used to live together and sleep, sit, and loiter together. And at the time of advertising oneself for acts of chivalry, sometimes, if there were any irregularity, I used to reproach him by saying, "My friend, you are very truthful," right? Arjuna would sometimes like mock Krishna, right? Like a friend. So I used to reproach him by saying, "My friend, you are very truthful." So even in those hours, when his value was minimized, he, being the supreme soul, used to tolerate all these utterings of mine, excusing me exactly as a true friend excuse his true friend, or a father excuses his son. So that's very interesting, right? How close was the relationship of Arjuna and Krishna, right? And we can understand, how difficult, how painful it is for Arjuna now that Krishna left, right? So next topic is Krishna leaves the planet and Arjuna is defeated, right? So this powerful warrior who defeated even the demigods, now he's going to be defeated by a group of uh, cowherds, like a group of bandits. So Arjuna, after speaking all this, he finally describes how he had been defeated on the way back to Hastinapura by a group of cowherd men armed with sticks while he was guarding the wives of Krishna. Although he was the same Arjuna, right, fighting this with the same Gandiva bow, mounted on the same chariot, he was defeated by such, insignificant opponents, right? Such like just some common bandits. So he says to Yudhishthira that, "O Emperor, now I am separated from my friends and dearmost well-wisher, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, my heart appears to be void of everything," right? My heart appears to be empty. In his absence, I have been defeated by a number of infidel cowherd men while I was guarding the bodies of all the wives of Krishna. I have the same Gandiva bow, the same arrows, the same chariot, drawn by the same horses, and I use them as the same Arjuna, to whom all the kings offered their due respects. But in the absence of Lord Krishna, all of them, at a moment's notice, have become null and void. It is exactly like offering clarified butter on ashes, accumulating money with a magic wand, or sowing seeds on barren land. Right? So these are the examples that Arjuna gives to Maharaja Yudhishthira to explain the situation. Right? Now, all his opulence, all his powers had become useless. So now we will try to understand what happened exactly, and how this could happen, right? First, how Arjuna could be defeated. Second, how the wives of Krishna could be kidnapped, and so on. So let's try to understand that. That's very mysterious. So we can understand that Arjuna could lose his power powers after the disappearance of Krishna, right? Because of course the Lord was the source of his powers, and he had empowered Arjuna to perform a certain mission, right? Fighting in the battle of Kurukshetra and so on. So at that point, right, when Arjuna is talking with Yudhishthira after everything is finished, his mission was already complete. So there was no need for Arjuna to still have such power, right? So okay, this point is easy to understand. Okay, Krishna left and he took away this empowerment from Arjuna because it was not needed anymore. Okay, this part is not so difficult to understand. But there is another point that is harder to understand. How this group of infidel cowherds, like this group of common bandits, they could take the wives of Krishna who were pure devotees, who were surrendered to him, right? And of course, this is all part of a pastime, but how to understand that? So, most of Krishna's associates in Dwarka, they are eternally liberated souls who came with Krishna from the spiritual world, right? So these Yadus, who are eternal associates, they never left the city, right? They just went back to the spiritual world when the city disappeared, right? So they never take birth in the material world. They just become manifest here when the city itself appears, right? Krishna comes, the city appears, they are there. So when Dwarka submerges in the ocean, like following the disappearance of Krishna, it just means that the city and all the associates who live there stopped being visible in this particular universe and they manifested somewhere else, right? So they just changed their others, we can say. So this is the first group, right? The eternal associates. They are just part of the pastimes. Pastime. They never take birth here. So the second group, however, is composed of the associates who joined Krishna's pastimes from this particular universe, right? And this group includes demigods who incarnated, to take part in Krishna's pastimes, the celestial ladies and sages who decided to associate with him, and so on, right? These are like quote unquote new associates, right? Who joined from here, from these planets. So these were the Yadus who left the city and participated on the pastime of the disappearance of the dynasty, right? This is narrated in the 11th canto. So, in connection with this particular passage of the cowherds kidnapping the wives of Krishna, there is an interesting explanation that some of the wives of Krishna, they were previously celestial girls who were cursed to be kidnapped after attaining Krishna as their husband, right, by the sage Astavakra. And others, they were gopis who wanted to become wives of Krishna to, also participate in his conjugal lila. And these gopis, after finishing this pastime as wives, they had to go back to their eternal position as gopis in Vrindavan, right? So to accomplish both, Krishna orchestrated this pastime. And this is narrated by Prabhupada in the purport, right? Prabhupada says here in the purport that once the fair denizens of heaven pleased Astavakra Muni by their service and were blessed by the Muni to have the Supreme Lord as their husband. Astavakra Muni was curved in 8 joints of his body, and thus he used to move in a peculiar curved manner. So the daughters of the demigods, they could not check their laughter life upon seeing the movements of the Muni. And the Muni, being angry at them, cursed them that they would be kidnapped by rogues, even if they would get the Lord as their husband. Right? So he blessed them to become wives of the Lord, but then they cursed them to, after that, being kidnapped by bandits. So later on, the girls again satisfied the Muni by their prayers, and the Muni blessed them that they would regain their husband even after being robbed by the rogues, right? So in order to keep the words of the great Muni, the Lord himself kidnapped his wives from the protection of Arjuna. Otherwise, they would have at once vanished from the scene as soon as they were touched by the rogues. Besides that, some of the gopis who prayed to become wives of the Lord returned to their respective positions after their desire was fulfilled. So this is the explanation of Prabhupada to these pastimes, right? And extra details are given in another passage. So after Krishna was hit by the arrow of the hunter Jara, right? That's how he disappeared from this planet. That was the pretext for the disappearance of Krishna. He was sitting under a banyan tree, right? And Daruka, his driver, the driver of the chariot of Krishna, he appeared there. And then Krishna told him, right? So now this is the next slide. So today I'm reading a lot, right? So today I'm quoting a lot from the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Krishna said to Daruka, "O driver, go to Dwarka and tell our family members how their loved ones destroyed one another. Also, tell them of the disappearance of Lord Sankarsana, Lord Balarama, and of my present condition. You and your relatives should not remain in Dwarka, the capital of the Yadus, because once I have abandoned that city, it will be inundated by the ocean. You should all take your own families together with my parents, and under Arjuna's protection, go to Indraprastha. Right? Indraprastha means Hastinapura. So this group was being escorted by Arjuna, right, to the capital, to Indraprastha, when they were attacked by a group of cowherds on the way, right? So these cowherds, they were just, simple people. They were armed with just sticks, right? Like bamboo rods, they were like, it was not even weapons, just, bamboo sticks. But still, Arjuna couldn't defeat them, despite his best efforts. So the power that Arjuna displayed before had left him, right? And Srila Prabhupada explains this again, 1:15:5. So Prabhupada say again, very nice explanation by Prabhupada. It's here on the screen also. So the power and energy which were best bestowed upon Arjuna were required for the fulfillment of the mission of the Lord. But when his mission was fulfilled, the emergency powers were withdrawn from Arjuna because the astounding powers of Arjuna, which were astonishing even to the denizens of heaven, were no longer required. And they were not meant for going back home, back to Godhead. Right? These powers of Arjuna were to fight in the battle, right? They were not helpful for Arjuna to go back home, back to Godhead. So if endowment of powers and withdrawal of powers by the Lord are possible, even for a great devotee like Arjuna, or even the demigods in heaven, then what to speak of the ordinary living beings who are but figs compared to such great souls? The lesson is, therefore, that no one should be puffed up for his powers borrowed from the Lord. The same man should rather feel obliged to the Lord for such benefactions and must utilize such power for the service of the Lord. Such power can be withdrawn at any time by the Lord. So the best use of such power and opulence is to engage them in the service of the Lord, right? Very interesting. So how was this fight, right, between Arjuna and the cowherds? So it's described that Arjuna, he tried to shoot arrows at the cowherd, right? Like he was always doing. But suddenly his bow became too heavy. So he used all his strength just to be able to hold the bow and draw the bow. And he started shooting a few arrows at the cowherds. But even when the arrows they would hit, they would not even pierce the skin. It was like toy arrows that he was throwing, right? The cowherds, they were just laughing at him. So in desperation, Arjuna tried to hit them using the sides of his bows. But the cowherds again just laughed at his attempts. So in this way, Arjuna was completely defeated by these cowherds, right? He couldn't even put a fight. But these were not ordinary cowherds, right? They were direct expansions of Krishna, right? To fulfill the course of Astavakra Muni, Krishna appeared in different forms to kidnap his own wives, right? So no problem. Krishna is just taking his wives back to Godhead. So after defeating Arjuna, these cowherds, they took the group and just brought them all back to Godhead, right? So Krishna's wives joined him in his eternal pastimes, right, in the spiritual world, and the gopis, they were brought back to Vrindavan to again serve Krishna in their original rasa and in their original lila, and his parents and other relatives they went to the next universe where Krishna was going to start, right, his pastimes. And on the way, the queens and gopis, they rejoined Krishna. They rejoined Krishna, right? And the course of the sage was fulfilled, right, at the same time. So Krishna made a pastime that fulfilled all purposes, right? So Arjuna, however, he couldn't understand that these cowherds, they were expansion of Krishna, right? So that's why he was feeling so dejected, right? If he understood that, okay, that was Krishna, no, of course he would accept that. But he didn't know that. So he thought he was really, defeated by these cowherds, and they took the wives of Krishna. So in this way, after being defeated by the cowherds, Arjuna went back to Indraprastha alone, right? And there he met with King Yudhishthira, and he narrated him everything that had happened. So although Arjuna, he looked so dejected, right, and he had tears in his eyes, they were not ordinary symptoms of sorrow. These were actually ecstatic symptoms because of the separation of Krishna. So it was not that Arjuna was just lamenting. Actually, his lamentation was not because he lost the battle, was just because of the separation of Krishna, right? He was fully Krishna conscious despite, the external symptoms. So the examples that Arjuna gives in the previous verse, right, offering clarified butter on ashes and accumulating money with a magic wand and sowing seeds on barren land, they describe how without the sanction of Krishna, all our efforts they can be rendered futile, right? There is this famous saying, man proposes, God disposes. So even a materialist, he can achieve something only when Krishna empowers him to do so. If Krishna doesn't empower him, he will not get any result from his activities. So as Prabhupada explains this in his purports, that all energies and powers, they are derived oops, sorry, I got lost here. Where is the quote? All energies and powers, they are derived from the Supreme Source, Lord Krishna, and they act as long as he desires and cease to function as soon as he withdraws, right? So comes from Krishna, goes back to Krishna. All electrical energies are received from the powerhouse, and as soon as the powerhouse stops supplying energy, the bulbs are of no use, right? If there is no electricity, the lamps will not work. In a moment's time, such energies can be generated or withdrawn by the supreme will of the Lord. So, without the sanction of Krishna, right, nothing will bring results, right? So just like offering ghee to ashes, that's one example that Arjuna uses, like offering ghee to ashes. Because when you do some fire sacrifice, you offer the ghee to the fire, chanting the mantras and so on. And this ghee, this oblation, it goes to Lord Vishnu or go to different demigods, depending on what kind of sacrifice is being done, and it results in different results, right? Spiritual results, material results. But if one just throw ghee into ashes, right, without fire, without mantras, of course this will not bring any result, right? And also, of course, if you plant seeds in an unproductive land, also you will not get any yield out of it, right? You will not get any grains or fruits out of it. And another example is accumulating money with a magic wand. So one may perform like some magic trick, right? And these tricks that you make money appear, right? But in reality, no money is being created, right? Well, a person is just manipulating his own money. He's just doing a trick. So one may perform the same trick, over and over, right? Oh, so much money is appearing. But actually, no new money is being generated, right? He's just playing with his own money. So it's useless on the purpose of accumulating money, right? So, okay, so next topic is Krishna leaves, right? So now Krishna is really going. So this painting here shows Krishna hitting the foot by the arrow of this hunter Jara. So next, Arjuna describes the fate of the other inhabitants of Dwarka, right? Uh, so uh, so there is another quote here. O king, since you have asked me about our friends and relatives in the city of Dwarka, I will inform you that all of them were cursed by. Here is the quote. O king, since you have asked me about our friends and relatives in the city of Dwarka, I will inform you that all of them were cursed or are cursed by the Brahmanas, and as a result, they all became intoxicated with wine made out of putrefied rice and fought among themselves with sticks, not even recognizing one another. Now, all but 4 or 5 of them are dead and gone. Factually, this is all due to the supreme will of the Lord, the personality of Godhead. Sometimes people kill one another, and at other times they protect one another. O king, as the ocean, as in the ocean, the bigger and stronger aquatics swallow up the smaller and weaker ones. So also the supreme personality of Godhead, to lighten the burden of art, has engaged the stronger Yadu, uh, to kill the weaker, and the bigger Yadu to kill the smaller, right? So interesting point, right? So these verses, they of course they describe the pastime of the disappearance of the Yadus, who were incarnations of the demigods, right? They left the city, they went to perform the sacrifice. When the sacrifice was finished, they started drinking some, liquor made out of rice, some sake or something like that. They became affected by this drink, and they started fighting between themselves. They were all kshatras, they all knew how to fight, and they started killing each other, right? And this way the whole dynasty was destroyed, right? So these Yadus, they left the city. Why? Because there was this curse of this sage, right? And so they went out of the city to perform a sacrifice, right? To try to counteract this curse. So after the sacrifice was over, they started drinking, this liquor made out of rice, and they became inebriated, right? And they started fighting, first verbally, and then using their fists, and then later they started using these bamboo rods, and also Krishna and Balarama also entered the fight, and the whole dynasty was finished. So in this way, all demigods, they could go back to their posts and continue, managing the universe, right? So this was a pastime enacted. So the whole dynasty could disappear before the disappearance of Krishna, because of course Krishna can't go and just leave all his devotees alone here in this material world, right? So after seeing the destruction of the dynasty, Krishna sits under a banyan tree, right? Very auspicious tree. And under this banyan tree, he instructed Uddhava and Maitreya. So this conversation between Krishna, Uddhava, and Maitreya is narrated on the 11th canto. And it's interesting that this conversation from the 11th canto, it happened before the conversation between Vidura and Maitreya that is narrated in the 4th canto, right? And in turn, this happened before Vidura returned to the palace and instructed Dhritarashtra, right, which is narrated in the first canto, right? So you see that, like I mentioned before, Bhagavatam is not in chronological order. The topic, the chapters, they are organized according to topic, not according to chronology. So the chronologies that we have here, right? The disappearance of Krishna. Krishna speaks to Uddhava and Maitreya. Then Krishna leaves the planet. Uddhava starts his walk going to Badarikashama, where he has a mission to give association to some sages who live there. And so he on the way there he met Vidura. Vidura asked about Krishna. He spoke something, but he told Vidura to go to Maitreya, that was close by. Maitreya also received the same knowledge. So Vidura went to Maitreya, and this conversation between Vidura and Maitreya are practically the whole third and fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And then after Vidura talked with Maitreya, he went back to the palace to save Dhritarashtra, his brother, right? Like we discussed previously. So see, that's the chronological order, right? First the 11th canto, then the third and fourth canto, then first canto, right? That's the chronological order. So anyway, so after Krishna finished uh, giving these instructions, right, to Uddhava and Maitreya, the hunter Jara hit him in the foot, right, with his arrow, and this gave Krishna the excuse to leave this universe and continue his pastimes in another universe. So after Krishna left, Dwarka also disappeared, right? Together with all the associates of Krishna who stayed in the city. So for the people of this planet who observed the events, the city appeared to just have submerged in the ocean, right? But in reality, it just became immanifest after the disappearance of Krishna. So just like Krishna disappears in one universe and becomes visible in another universe, right? Dwarka also manifests and disappears from the same universes following Krishna, right? And then we have another quote here. This quote is from Prabhupada. So this is from 1:15:34. So Prabhupada explains these points. He says that the Lord and his eternal associates, they appeared on earth to help the administrative demigods in eradicating the burden of the world. He therefore called for some of the confidential demigods to appear in the Yadu dynasty and serve him in his great mission. After the mission was fulfilled, the demigods, by the will of the Lord, relinquished their corporal bodies by fighting amongst themselves in the madness of intoxication, right? So that's how Prabhupada explains it. So this is the pastime of the disappearance of Krishna, right? So the reason is that Krishna has to go to another universe, right? Now he's going to go to another universe together with his associates to continue executing his pastimes. And then next topic, we are almost finishing for today. Next topic is Arjuna remembers the instructions of the Bhagavad Gita, right? So in this mood of deep sadness, right, due to the disappearance of Krishna, Arjuna, he remembers Krishna's teachings to him when he was in a similar situation, right? Right before the battle of Kurukshetra, when Krishna destroyed all his doubts by speaking the Bhagavad Gita, right? So Arjuna starts to remember all these instructions that Krishna gave him. So by this remembrance, Arjuna's mind finally became pacified, right? Haribo. So Krishna says here, that's verses 27-28. Now I am attracted to those instructions imparted to me by the personality of Godhead, Govinda, because they are impregnated with instructions for relieving the burning hearts in all circumstances of time and space. Sutta Goswami said, thus, being deeply absorbed in thinking of the instructions of the Lord, which were imparted in great intimacy and friendship, and in thinking of his lotus feet, Arjuna's mind became pacified and free from all material contamination, right? Jai, right? Very beautiful passage. So in this way, Arjuna, he gives us the example of how can we deal with difficult situations in life. Because generally, when people are faced with problems like serious problems, they deal with these problems in two ways, right? Some people they find solace, they find hope in imagining that the problems they will be eventually solved and they be in a better situation, right? Everything will be all right philosophy, right? So for some people this helps, just this idea that okay, it's going to pass, everything is going to be all right, and so on. So that's one way to deal with problems. But another way that is that many they just fall into depression, right? And they just start taking shelter of different types of intoxication, right? They just intoxication, they start drinking and all these things. So, however, Arjuna he shows us a third path, right? These first two paths they are for materialists. This third path is for devotees. So this third path is to take shelter in transcendental knowledge, right? Especially the Bhagavad Gita, which can be studied at all times, of course, but especially in times of need, right? And Prabhupada explains this in this purport, right? Very beautiful purport. He says that the problem which arose in the heart of Arjuna in the battlefield of Kurukshetra was solved by the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita. Again, after the departure of the Lord from the vision of earthly people, when Arjuna was face to face with being vanquished and his acquired power and prominence, he wanted again to remember the great teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, just to teach all concerned that the Bhagavad Gita can be consulted in all critical times, not only for solace from all kinds of mental agonies, but also for the way out of great entanglements, which may embarrass one in some critical hour. Right? So he says that the Bhagavad Gita begins with the problems of life by discriminating the soul from the elements of matter and proves by all reason and argument that the soul is indestructible in all circumstances, is that the outer covering of matter, the body and the mind, change for another term of material existence, which is full of miseries. So the Bhagavad Gita is therefore meant for terminating all different types of miseries, and Arjuna took shelter of this great knowledge which had been imparted to him during the Kurukshetra battle, right? Haribo. So, okay, here, right? The next verses, right, of this chapter, they describe the results of applying this transcendental knowledge, because not only does it provides us with a real solution, right, for our life struggles, right? That's the only real solution, right? Krishna consciousness is the only real solution. Other material solutions, like you can't solve problems, you can't solve all the problems with money, you can't solve all the problems with medicine, you can't solve all the problems with social connections, right? When a person is dying, a person can be the richest person, the most well-connected person. When it's his time, he's going to die, and after he dies he has to take another body, right? Disease, right? Often disease can't be cured, even with the most expensive medicine. So we can see that material solutions, they not always work. The only thing that really works is liberation from the material world, right? To go back to Godhead. And that's the real point here, right? Of transcendental knowledge. So this transcendental knowledge, it allows us to elevate ourselves to a transcendental position, right? Free from the influence of the three modes. And at this stage, we can not only live peacefully, but also remember Krishna at the time of death, right? Returning thus to our original position in the spiritual world. That's the real solution. So, because of his possessing, right, spiritual, this is another quote. So, because of his possessing spiritual assets, right, the doubts of duality were completely cut off. Thus, he was freed from the three modes of material nature and placed in transcendence. There was no longer any chance of his becoming entangled in birth and death, for he was freed from material form, right? Interesting, right? Again, very beautiful verse. And then we come here to the point of the Pandavas retiring, right? Now the Pandavas are going to abandon their royal life and go to the Himalayas to serve Krishna and concentrate their minds in devotional service. So, after hearing that Krishna and the whole Yadu dynasty, they had left the planet, right? Maharaja Yudhishthira, he decided to also leave, right? Go back home, back to Godhead. So he prepared to abandon now this who is royal throne, right? To go to the Himalayas by dressing appropriately, right? As a renunciant. So he was not dressing more anymore like a king. He dressed in very simple clothes. So he enthroned uh, Parikshit Maharaj, right, as the emperor of Hastinapura, and also he enthroned Vraja, the grandson of Krishna, on Mathura, as the king of the kingdom of Surasena. And then he formalized his renunciation by executing a Prajapati sacrifice, right, and placing in himself the fire for renounced life, right? So he formally accepted renounced life. He formally became a renunciant, right? And this process of Maharaja Yudhishthira of renunciation that he executed is further described in Srimad Bhagavatam. So this is this long quote here that you can see in the screen that that Maharaja Yudhishthira, right? He amalgamated all the sense organs into the mind and the mind into life, life into breathing, his total existence into the embodiment of the five elements, and his body into that. Then the pure self, then as the pure self, he became free from the material conception of life. So this is a process that is described in other instances of Srimad Bhagavatam that many yogis and great personalities they use at the time of death, that by meditation you can dissolve all the association with the body, and by this process you can become free from the senses, then from the mind, from the intelligence, from the ego, and then you see yourself as the pure soul, and as the pure soul you of course can become completely free from all material conceptions. So continue the verse. Thus, annihilating the gross body of five elements into the three qualitative modes of material nature, he merged them into one nescience and then absorbed that nescience in the self, Brahman, which is inexhaustible in all circumstances. Right? So, in this way, Maharaja Yudhishthira, he became free from his bodily conception of life, from the mind, intelligence, ego. He became free from association with all of this. So after that, Maharaja Yudhishthira dressed himself in torn clothing, gave up eating all solid foods, voluntarily became dumb, right, and let his hair hang loose, right. So he gave up all kinds of social etiquette and so on. He just became completely absorbed in the self. So all this combined to make him look like an urchin or madman with no occupation. He did not depend on his brothers for anything, right? He became completely renounced at this point. And just like a deaf man, he heard nothing, right? So he became completely transcendental. He then started towards the north, treading the path accepted by his forefathers and great men who devote himself completely to the thought of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and he lived in that way wherever he went. The younger brothers of Maharaja Yudhishthira observed that the age of Kali had already arrived, throughout the world, and that the citizens of the kingdom were already affected by irreligious practice. Therefore, they decided to follow in the footsteps of their elder brother, right? So this is narrated in the Srimad Bhagavatam, right? How the Pandavas they followed Maharaja Yudhishthira in his renunciation. So all the five Pandavas they went to the Himalayas, and from there they disappeared from the face of the planet. So again, so in this way, no, the Pandavas they went to the Himalayas, right, to practice devotional service, and they went back to Godhead. So is interesting that it's mentioned that this abode, quote, right, this abode of the Lord Sri Krishna, known as Goloka Vrindavan, cannot be attained by persons who are absorbed in the material conception of life. But the Pandavas, being completely washed of all material contamination, attained that abode in their very same bodies, right? So one may then another question can appear. One may question how they could reach the spiritual world in the same bodies. How is that, right? How like you can go to the spiritual world in a material body? How is that? So Srila Jiva Goswami he concludes, right, in his Priti Sandarbha, that this is because their bodies were not material. That's how they could reach the spiritual planets in the same bodies. Because due to their advanced devotional service, the Pandavas they became pure to such an extent that their bodies became completely spiritualized, right? That's how they could go. And then, so the five Pandavas left, and Kunti also heard when Arjuna this is the next slide already. And then Kunti also heard when Arjuna spoke about the disappearance of Krishna, right? And the Yadu dynasty. And thus she also prepared to go back home, back to Godhead, right? By engaging devotional service. And this is described in verse 33. As I will read. Kunti, after overhearing Arjuna's telling of the end of the Yadu dynasty and the disappearance of Lord Krishna, engaged in the devotional service of the transcendental personality of Godhead with full attention, and thus gained release from the course of material existence, right? So the Pandavas became liberated by going to the Himalayas and serving Krishna there, and Kunti became liberated by staying in the palace but occupying herself in this deep meditation in Krishna. And then what about Vidura? Vidura, he resumed his pilgrimage, right? And eventually he left his body in a place called Prabhasha Kshetra, that's in Western India. And he left in full Krishna consciousness, right? He was completely pure in thought. But he couldn't immediately go back to Godhead because he still had a service to perform as Yamaraj, right? In this way, he went back to his abode. He was received by the inhabitants of Pitriloka, and from there he was reinstated in his post. That's the problem of being a demigod, because once you become a demigod, you are forced, you are duty bound to remain a demigod, right, for a very long time. Demigods, they live for 300 million years. They live for a whole Manvantara. So it's a very long period of time. Like it's a very big commitment, right? People are afraid of getting married, right? To commit to a person for, I don't know, maybe 20 or 30 or 50 years, right? So imagine committing for a post that you have to stay for 300 million years. That's a very big commitment. So during this time, even if the demigods they meet Krishna, even if they participate in their pastimes, in his pastimes, even if they become pure devotees, they can't immediately go back to Godhead. They have to stay and finish their service, and then only at the end they can go. So yeah, it's not a very good idea, right, to become a demigod. So, and then about Pitriloka, also interesting information. So although Pitriloka is a paradisiac place, like where pious persons they live in great opulence, like it's like a celestial place. Because Pitriloka is in the court of Yamaraj, it is geographically situated at the bottom of the universe, close to the hellish planets. They're very like low in the hierarchy of the universe, right? So because it's connected with Yamaraj, so it has to be close to where Yamaraj stays. So Pitriloka is like a celestial planet that is situated geographically close to the hellish planets. So this is a very interesting place. Pious people who are attached to their families, they have the opportunity to meet their ancestors there and enjoy with them, while at the same time, observing their descendants on art, right? So they can remain there in Pitriloka as long as their descendants, they honor them and they offer them food and water, right? Pinda, every year. So we can see that these offerings to the ancestors, they are present in many, many different cultures. They are present, of course, in Vedic cultures. They are present in Shintoism. They are present in some types of Buddhism. So it's very interesting, right? Eastern culture, in most Eastern cultures, this is present. Why? Because it comes from the Vedas originally, right? These offerings to the ancestors and this belief that you can meet your ancestors again in the after death. So, in other words, pious people, they can extend their current identities and remain connected with their family members if they can perform their family duties properly and leave pious descendants who can continue the family tradition, right? If they can remain pious, honor their ancestors according to the rules of the scriptures, right? And that's why in Vedic culture, the offerings to the ancestors, they are considered so important, right? Because when this chain is broken, then all the ancestors, they fall from Pitriloka, and the lineage, they just ends, right? So this is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita by Arjuna when he says that, this is 141, he says that an increase of unwanted population certainly causes hellish life both for the family and for those who destroy the family tradition. The ancestors of such corrupt families fall down because the performances for offering them food and water are entirely stopped, right? So see, this describes this phenomenon, right? And in verse 50 is described that Draupadi stayed in the palace with Subhadra, and they were practicing pure devotional service together by remembering Krishna's pastimes, right? So it says here, that's the last quote here in this slide, that Draupadi also saw that her husbands, without caring for her, were leaving home. She knew well about Lord Vasudeva, Krishna, the personality of Godhead. Both she and Subhadra became absorbed in thoughts of Krishna and attained the same results as their husbands. And then we have a very, very powerful purport that Prabhupada gives in this verse, 115.50, that Prabhupada says that when flying an airplane, one cannot take care of other planes. Everyone has to take care of his own plane. And if there is any danger, no other plane can help another in that condition. Similarly, at the end of life, when one has to go back home, back to Godhead, everyone has to take care of himself without help rendered by another. The help is, however, offered on the ground before the flying in space. Similarly, the spiritual master, the father, the mother, the relatives, the husband, and others can now render help during one's lifetime. But while crossing the sea, one has to take care of himself and utilize the instructions formerly received. Draupadi had 5 husbands, and no one asked Draupadi to come. Draupadi had to take care of herself without waiting for her great husbands. And because she was already trained, she at once took to concentration upon the lotus feet of Lord Vasudeva, Krishna, the personality of Godhead. The wives also got the same results as their husbands. In the same manner, that is to say, without changing their bodies, they reached the destination of Godhead, right? They also went back home, back to Godhead. So Srila Visvanatha Chakravarti Thakura suggests that both Draupadi and Subhadra, although her name is not mentioned herein, got the same result. none of them had to quit the body, right? So interesting, right? But then another apparent contradiction appear, because an attentive reader of these verses, he may notice a contradiction between this description that we have here in the Srimad Bhagavatam and the Mahabharata, because in the Mahabharata it is described that Draupadi went with the Pandavas to the Himalayas, right? So Srila Jiva Goswami, he explains, right, in the Satsandarbhas, that the events described by Vyasadeva in the Mahabharata, they are actually pastimes that happened in a different universe. These were not the pastimes that happened 5,000 years ago here on Earth. These are just pastimes that happened somewhere else. And these were pastimes that he could see in his meditation, right? Vyasadeva, he wrote the whole Mahabharata in meditation. He was meditating in the pastimes. Ganesha was writing, right? So in this way, he saw some pastimes that happened here and some pastimes from other universes, and he compiled everything in the Mahabharata, right? But the events on the Srimad Bhagavatam, on the other hand, these are the exact events that happened here in your planet 5,000 years ago, right? So the pastimes of the Pandavas in the Mahabharata, they are eternal, right? Always there is some universe somewhere where the Pandavas, they are executing their pastimes, right? However, the pastimes, they don't happen in exactly the same way every time, right? They're not machines, right? There are some variations in the pastimes. So this is one example of, variation. Another point is that the Mahabharata is destined for common people, right? Who are, not expected to understand, very advanced, spiritual topics. While the Srimad Bhagavatam is a book destined to Paramahansas, right? Who are on their way back to Godhead. So in this way, it is expected that the description in both books, they may differ. Because different passages and details, they are emphasized in these books according to the public that they are destined to, right? So the last verse of the 15th chapter, this gives us another blessing. That's another verse of a gift. So it says that the subject of the departure of the sons of Pandu for the ultimate goal of life, back to Godhead, is fully auspicious and is perfectly pure. Therefore, anyone who hears this narration with devotional faith certainly gains the devotional service of the Lord, the highest perfection of life. Jai, sis, just by studying this pastime with faith, we can gain devotional service to Krishna, right? Very auspicious. So if one is interested in blessings, he should actually study Srimad Bhagavatam, because there are so many blessings here in the Bhagavatam. And then last topic for today, Kali Yuga starts in force, and also the appearance of the golden age of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So it's described that in the same day Krishna left the planet, Kali Yuga became fully manifest, right? So there is a quote here. When the personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, left this earthly planet in his self-same form, from that very day, Kali, who had already partially appeared, became fully manifest to create inauspicious conditions for those who are endowed with a poor fund of knowledge, right? So from the day that Krishna left, Kali Yuga became fully manifested, full power, right? So the Pandavas, they received the news of the disappearance of Krishna, right? Months after the events had happened. And thus, the descriptions of the degradation of the people that we studied in the 14th chapter, they were observed by Maharaja Yudhishthira when Kali Yuga was already active, right? And another interesting factor is that because in this Kali Yuga, Lord Chaitanya, he comes to perform his pastimes and save all the souls, Kali manifests especially strong in the first 5,000 years, right? Advanced his agenda to the fullest, like before the 10,000 years of the golden age of the Sankirtan movement could start. And we can see that the symptoms that are described in the Srimad Bhagavatam, right, in the 12th canto, for the end of Kali Yuga, they were already observable in the Middle Ages, right? All this misery and people working so hard for a piece of bread, and people dying, when they are 20 something years old and so on. All this happened really, during the Middle Ages. Some other things are happening now, right? So all these pastimes, all these not pastimes, all these descriptions for the end of Kali Yuga that appear on the 12th canto, they were appearing already right in the beginning of Kali Yuga, right? Because Kali was really, trying to work very hard to really degrade human society, before the golden age could start. And observing this current situation of the world, like all this materialism and consumerism and hedonism and narcissism and whatever, seeing this current situation of the world, we may question how a golden age is supposed to start. Now, especially considering how our movement appears to be now much less powerful than in the times of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, right? When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was personally present, right? So if a golden age didn't start at that time, how it's supposed to start now when we are weaker, right? So that is an explanation for that, and it's quite interesting. So the point is that it is described that when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was present in the planet, all the souls in the planet, they went back to Godhead by the influence of his chanting, right? So all the souls, they left, seemingly, seamlessly, right? So without without the world being destroyed, all the souls, they just left. Everyone went back to Godhead together with Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And what happened is that the soul was then, seamlessly repopulated with a new batch of souls, right? Like on the same bodies, right? It's not that everyone fell dead at the same time. On the same bodies, just new souls who were qualified for that particular situations. They just assumed all these bodies that were there, right? They just awakened from the causal ocean, and life just continued as if nothing had happened. But now the world is populated with new souls. These are not the same souls that participated on the Sankirtan movement of Mahaprabhu, right? So the Sankirtan movement that was started by Mahaprabhu, it was concluded by his disappearance. When Lord Chaitanya left, almost everyone went back to Godhead with him, and new souls took place, right? Took the place, right? So this original movement that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu started, it finished with his disappearance. Everyone went back to Godhead. And then a new Sankirtan movement was started from zero, with the preaching of Srila Narottama Dasa Thakura, Shyamananda Thakura, and others, based on the Vani, on the instructions of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his associates, right? And this Vani was the seed from which future generations, they could also get the love of Godhead. So then the second Sankirtan movement started, right? From zero, with these new souls that never had practiced devotional service before, right? So from there, things that were gradually being built, right? With the contributions of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakura, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakura, and then Prabhupada also adding his contribution, right? And in this way, by their preaching, by their, broadcasting of Krishna consciousness, the number of advanced devotees on the planet started growing, right? So the Sankirtan movement it has these two phases, right? The first phase started with Mahaprabhu, and it was concluded with the withdrawal of his manifested pastimes. When he left, everyone left with him. And then from there, a new batch of souls, they started their practice of Krishna consciousness, right? From zero, under the guidance of a new generation of preachers, right? Including a few associates of Mahaprabhu who remained on the planet. And these were souls who started their Krishna consciousness from scratch, right? And they are, so these souls, they started at that time 500 years ago, and these souls are now practicing for a number of lives already. And of course, new souls, they join, right, the movement at every generation. So this wave has been growing since these times, right? And it's now becoming bigger and bigger. More people are knowing about Krishna. More people are starting to practice Krishna consciousness to some capacity. So the older students, the older devotees, they are guiding the new students, right? The new devotees. And we may have even a few associates of Mahaprabhu amongst us, supervising things. And this new movement is developing, right? And as the number of pure devotees increases, it will eventually lead to this 10,000 years of the golden age predicted by Prabhupada and the previous acharyas. We don't know when it will start, but it's a fact that it will start one day because it's growing, right? It's growing and growing and growing. People who start practicing devotional service in this life, they will continue practicing in next lives, and others will join. So the number of devotees in the planet, it will just keep increasing and increasing and increasing. It's already like a few millions already. Some people speak about 2-3 million now. Few years ago, they were speaking about 1 million. So now 2-3 million. So we see it's increasing. Soon it's going to be 10 million, then 100 million, then 1 billion, then 5 billion, right? Then you come to a point that almost everyone is a devotee. So, okay, so Hare Krishna, thank you very much. So now we can open to questions. So if you have any questions or comments. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. It's difficult to ask because this part I heard this previously in Russian to be able to understand. And I just want to say thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
this
Hare
lesson.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
And this lesson is this chapter is very a very wonderful chapter because so many of these interesting pastimes, these interesting details about the disappearance of Krishna and the reaction of the different devotees to these events, right? Are there so many details are present, and it's so emotional, right? Arjuna, being defeated by the cowherds and losing all the wives of Krishna, and then having to go and explain to King Yudhishthira, and then the Pandavas, they uh, leaving the planet, taking sannyas, and then Kunti also becoming absorbed in devotional service, Draupadi and Subhadra staying behind, and also discussing between themselves about Krishna, right? Also being busy in glorifying Krishna and so on. So, and also this interesting information about the golden age of, how the golden age can really start, right? How it's realistically a golden age can start, even considering the sad status of the world right now. So many details all present in this chapter.
I understand that after Krishna's disappearance, all of these persons, Pandavas and another, they left the planet very quickly, yeah, because they are eternal servant of Krishna, and wherever Krishna appears, they appear with him, yeah,
Yes,
for another roles, yes.
they didn't stay very long in the planet. They just fixed their meditation in Krishna. They just left. Practically all Krishna associates, they left. Only Uddhava stayed for more time because Uddhava, he went to Bhadrarikashrama. Krishna gave him this mission of going there and giving association to the sages there. So Uddhava went and he stayed more time in the planet. But the other associates, all went very quickly back to Godhead. They didn't want to stay, more than necessary in this material world after Krishna left.
I heard one thing that maybe Gandhari cursed Krishna that he will die after several years. Yes or
Yes,
no?
there is this curse after the battle of Kurukshetra because she lost all her sons. Gandhari, she cursed Krishna to die together with his whole dynasty after 36 years. And that's exactly the chronology. After 36 years, after the battle of Kurukshetra, that is this pastime that Krishna abandons the planet. Of course, Gandhari cursed, 36 years because that was already the wish of the Lord. So because she was angry, she wanted to curse. Krishna inspired from the heart. Okay, you curse me to die in 36 years, right? Because that's exactly what I need. So Krishna.
It also Krishna's plan, yes, that
Yes, see,
Gandhari.
everything comes from Krishna, no?
Yeah.
Krishna is in the heart of everyone. So all these, even these demons, they attack when they attack Vrindavan, they attack in the right moment, according to the pastime to happen, the way Krishna wants or the way that Yoga Maya planned. So Krishna just dovetailed, this desire of Gandharva of cursing him with his pastimes, right? Of leaving the material universe and so on.
And all Yadava dynasty also left the planet very
Yeah,
why they left the planet this way?
Yeah, the Yadus actually they left before Krishna. There was this fight, right? They all left, and then Krishna went to under the banyan tree. He spoke with Vidura and not Vidura, with Uddhava and Maitreya, and then he was hit by the arrow, and then he left. So the Yadus they left a little bit, few hours or maybe a few days before Krishna, right? So when Krishna left, everyone had left already. And then the last one was Balaram. Balaram, he left after Krishna. When he saw that Krishna left, then he left. And the Pandavas, they went a little after, like apparently a few months after Krishna, when they received the news. The Pandavas and Draupadi and Subhadra and Kunti, they went also. Okay.
Balaram is incarnation, not Nityananda is incarnation of Balaram, yeah?
Yes, Balaram is the original expansion of Krishna. Prabhupada explains that there is the supreme God, that's Krishna, and Balaram is a servitor God. He's also Krishna, but he's in the position of a servant of Krishna, right? And Balaram is the original guru. So he has this mission of engaging all the souls in the service of Krishna. So he comes in many forms. The guru is considered an empowered representative of Balaram, and Lord Nityananda is also an incarnation of Balaram. So Balaram is very important in your lives because he comes in so many forms to help us in different ways to go back to Godhead, to find our path, back to Godhead. And there is a question here from Arya. Arya Nurag, he's asking, we'll put him here. Okay, he's not speaking, but I'll put him in the conversation. So he says, Hare Krishna Prabhu, I wanted to ask about the system of hell and meeting ancestors. When souls get transported there, do they change bodies? How exactly does the system work? And also, does Krishna choose who to become devotees of him in which life? I've had my own experiences that make me feel like he purposefully acts with divine intervention to make people realize. And the point about people becoming devotees or not is that everyone has free will. And that's a very important point to understand if we want to understand, many difficult philosophical topics. Without understanding this point about the free will of the soul, many points they can't be understood, or we will reach the wrong conclusion. So that's a very important point that Prabhupada makes. At every position, in any position, the soul has free will. No one becomes a prisoner of, in the spiritual world. The soul is there, of course. Who is going to be fool enough to want to leave this position? But no one is prisoner. If one wants to come to the material world for any purpose, he can come. He's free. Narada Muni, he's coming and going all the time, right? He's here, then he goes back to Goloka, then he goes to visit Lord Narayana in Vaikuntha, then he comes back to material world. He's coming and going all the time. He's free, right? So the soul has free will at any point. So Krishna, he gives his mercy to everyone, right? Pure devotees, they are always walking around the planet, and they are very merciful. They are ready to help anyone who wants to find, his path. but depends on people accepting this help or not. It's just like the sun, right? Krishna and his pure devotees, they are like the sun. There is this example. The sun is always shining in the sky for everyone, right? And as long as you don't try to hide from the sun, you are going to receive the light of the sun, right? It's free for everyone. But if one if he no tries to hide in his room, right? No, I don't want to see the sun. Then what can be done, right? Then he will not see the sun, but it's not fault of the sun, it's his own fault. The sun is available for him, but he's not seeing the sun because he is hiding from the sun. So similarly, the mercy of Krishna is available for everyone. But the point is that most people, they hide from this mercy. They try to avoid devotees. They try to avoid contact with Krishna. That's why they don't become devotees. But still, pure devotees, they're always trying, and they always, try to find ways to little by little engage these people in devotional service under different pretexts. And then about the hell and also Pitriloka, right? People who go to Pitriloka are pious people. Sinful people can't go there. So sinful people, they go to hell. No, simple as that, right? The people who go to Pitriloka are a different public. These are pious people who are not going to hell. They are people who even if they are not even if they are not, they may not be devotees, but at least they are pious people, right? So they are performing their duties, taking good care of their families, studying the scriptures and following the family traditions and so on. So they're not sinful people. So they go to Pitriloka and they can enjoy there. They can stay together with their ancestors and look at their descendants on art, as long as and then as long as their descendants, they keep following these family traditions and offering oblations to the ancestors, they can stay there. So the whole family stay there, and every new generation has this duty of maintaining this family tradition, because when this family tradition is stopped, then the whole family, all the ancestors, they fall down from Pitriloka. Anyway, this happens one day, right? It's impossible to continue eternally, right? So that's how it works. Okay. So anyone has any questions more or any comment? Okay, if not, we can finish for today, right? We had already a lot of interesting discussion. So thank you very much, dear devotees. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Thank you for coming. I hope that you can come again next week, same time. And next week we will discuss more topics connected with Parikshit and how he received the age of Kali, right? And there are very interesting topics on these next chapters. So thank you very much, Hare Krishna. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Gaura Premanande, Haribo, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. See you next week. All glories to Srila Prabhupada.